Well, we've been walking through the archives of history, learning more about our state via road tripping, taking a stop in Juneau as Justin Matson takes a tour of a building that makes history every year.
We are road tripping Alaska. We are here at the Alaska State Capitol building. We're meeting with Kirk, who's about to give us a tour of the building. Thanks for taking time with us today, Kirk.
My pleasure.
Shall we go on inside?
Let's go on inside. These date from the 1980s. They are done in clay. And the first one over here is called the Harvest of the Sea. And then over here, this one is called the Harvest of the Land.
The moment you walk inside the Alaska State Capitol, you are bombarded with pieces of the past, showcasing Alaska's deep and rich history. Even if the building looks a little plain, you like to call the architecture early American 20th century post office.
It was built between 1929 and 1931, and so it was intended to represent Alaska as best they understood it at the time. But it was also originally the federal and territorial building, which is why it actually had a post office in it, because as a multi-agency federal building, it was required to. The design group who did the blueprints for it during the construction also did post offices of the day. So they used a lot of the same elements in the design.
But there's still so much more to see. We'll start on the 5th floor, as all the tours do. In the Senate Finance Committee, one statue caught my eye.
That is Mr. Uhtred Permanent Fundsen, the defender of the permanent fund.
But that's not the only thing this room is famous for. It has its own legacy and artwork.
This was the federal and territorial building, so one of the things it housed was the federal court. So this was one of the two courtrooms. This is what Sitka looked like in 1886. The artist was a gentleman named Cleveland Rockwell, and he had been a cartographer, a captain in the U.S. Army during the Civil War. So after the war, when he was discharged, he did continue making maps, and he came to the Pacific Northwest and up to Alaska to continue his trade as a map maker. This is called the Arctic Madonna. It's painted by Eustace Paul Ziegler, a very famous Alaskan artist. And it's really amazing. There's so much life and vibrancy in the painting, despite the fact that it's a fairly muted color palette.
We find ourselves on the 4th floor with newspaper clippings highlighting impactful moments from Alaska's history.
But some of it is quite interesting. President Eisenhower coming to Alaska, the first president, Harding, who came to Alaska. The two articles that are most important in this hallway to Juneau's history are at the end here. So here we have an article about the collapse of the Treadwell mine on Douglas Island. This happened in April of 1917. The Treadwell mine was one of the most productive mines in the world at the time.
The 3rd floor is where bills become laws, home to the governor's office. It's where you can see who governed Alaska, even when it was a territory.
This is where the magic happens for the executive branch. The building is kind of unusual in that we house the legislative branch and the executive branch in the same building. But the guy who's really interesting is John Stronghair.
Okay.
Now, he does bear a shocking resemblance to Sam Elliott. If you notice, he served for almost the entirety of the Wilson administration. And apparently he was an able governor. He did a good job. And in spite of the fact that he was doing the job well, he was, and depending on who you talk to, either outright fired, asked to resign, or simply not reappointed. And you might wonder, well, what went wrong? Why would you get rid of somebody who was doing a good job? And the answer is really astonishing. He was born in New Brunswick, Canada, and he was not a U.S. citizen. And that was kind of a prerequisite for the job, so he had to go.
The 2nd floor is where your senators and representatives work. Without the legislature in session, the rooms lay locked up and bare. And that's what brought us to the showstopper on the 1st floor, a piece of art showcasing two types of Alaska.
Oh, look at the color. And if you're old enough, you might remember the old paint by numbers kits. Oh, yeah. This immediately jumps out at me as that kind of a kit because of the detail in it and just the vibrancy of the colors. But it's not. It is actually a freehand oil on canvas. It was painted by Vasily Ushanov in 1982. And Ushanov was an interesting character. He was born in China, obviously of Russian descent, and he made his way to the United States apparently in his teen years. Got his education, worked his way through college, and was professionally a dentist.
I thoroughly enjoyed our tour of the Alaska State Capitol building. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to make sure that this report gets filed on time. Justin Mattson, Alaska's news source.